Hello, everyone. I'm Jason Cohen, the author of An Introduction to the Art and Science of Chinese Tea Ceremony. Today, we're discussing Book 2, Chapter 8, Section 6, Xiaohongni, Ore and Clay. Here to talk about this chapter is our editorial team, Patrick Penny.
Hey.
Zongjun Lee.
Hello, hello.
And Emily Huang.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. This is a short and perhaps surprising chapter. We've just spoken and published the chapter on Hongni, ore and clay, which many people know and love. Why wasn't Xiaohongni a subsection within that chapter? Why is Xiao, little, Hongni worthy of its own chapter?
Well, Xiaohongni is essentially a totally different clay, despite the name shares some similarities to Hongni. For example, Xiaohongni originally it's a wetter form of neizi instead of baini, which is the original material for Hongni. And also the harvest region is different too, where most of the Xiaohongni are harvested in Pudong area, which is actually pretty far away from most of the Hongni are harvested.
Xiaohongni is not the opposite of the Hongni. It's something totally different.
Totally different.
Why was Xiaohongni named Xiaohongni? Was it purposely to aid in causing confusion, or is there a good argument for the name?
When Xiaohongni was first harvested and used, a lot of people use it as a kind of a substitute or imitation of Hongni. It gets sometimes even sold under the name of Hongni, despite being Xiaohongni in nature. It was also used as a coating material sometimes for zini wares, which people would call it neizi waihongs. So Xiaohongni was coated outside of usually a zini teapot as a kind of like a huazhuang tool, a makeup clay to decorate it for aesthetic purpose. But definitely there's an intention buried in the naming of Xiaohongni that people wanted to remind people that this is either related to Hongni or it's a form of Hongni, but in fact it's not.
And I wonder how much of that has to do with the firing color versus just as the shortage of Hongni started to happen in the 70s, people were looking for a substitute other consumers might not feel is inferior immediately. And so you say, well, this is Xiaohongni. It's basically like Hongni, just a little different. So I wonder how much marketing kind of plays into that as well.
Is this a sought after ore or clay? Is this a material you'd like to feature in your teapot collection?
I'm going to guess no, because I literally never heard of it until this chapter was written. So it's not like as if I've been scrolling around on the internet and see people posting about or glorifying Xiaohongni teapots.
Xiaohongni is not really good as a clay to firing on its own until modern technology nowadays. It's too soft and the shapeability is not very good. The deformation rate is also very high. And also a lot of other additives or adding of Hongni or other materials with stronger structural integrity so that it can be fired into teapot shape.
I think I do own one potentially Xiaohongni containing pot though, because I do have a neizi waihong. So I might have one in my collection.
I was going to play devil's advocate here for a moment. I was going to circle back to the neizi waihong. So the neizi waihongs were slip coated in a mix of Xiaohongni clay, and they seem to be particularly sought after. So what can explain that discrepancy where we say, well, Xiaohongni is not a desirable ore, and yet here we have the neizi waihongs that are considered to be desirable teapots? Is this just because of the F1 fanboy club, or are these actually great teapots? Is Xiaohongni secretly great clay that's been overlooked?
Well, just my opinion, but the neizi waihong, the whole thing is that it's zuni on the inside, right? And so the clay that's actually interacting with the tea is zuni. The hongni on the outside is just your xiaohongni, potentially is just your nice, beautiful visual effect. And I think people really like these pots because they take on quite a lot of color, right? From what I remember. So I think they form patinas quite quickly. The positive tea interactions are really zuni based, not xiaohongni based. I don't think people recognize that a lot of these pots are Xiaohongni. They just see waihong and they assume it's Hongni. Wonder what your guys' thoughts are about that.
Yeah, being a very typical F1 factory, results definitely plays a role into people chasing after this specific type of teapot. And also, there's definitely some firing mastery required to produce such a teapot because there is a temperature discrepancy between Zini and Xiaohongni. So in order to fire such teapot, you really have to control the temperature in the right range so that there's no crackage in both clay.
I'm going to stay on this devil's advocate kick for one more question. Xiaohongni is also blended with modern Juni, commonly blended with modern Juni. And so if someone is looking for a good modern Juni teapot, is a blend with Xiaohongni good or bad for the material properties of the ware and its pairing with tea? Should they be specifically looking to avoid that as there's a better blending material, or is Xiaohongni a good choice for a contemporary ware?
It's not necessarily that the blend is wrong. You can still do a really good blend combined with a good firing, a good master, the good shape. So I don't think it's something that I would necessarily avoid, but I would definitely be more careful because I don't have the scientific equipment to dissect the specific contents of the clay.
Yeah, definitely agree. There's definitely not a binary yes or no here. First of all, no teapot maker or vendor is going to tell you, oh, yeah, this is actually blended with some Xiaohongni. So just in case you were thinking of not buying it, keep that in mind. But I think it really all comes down to the normal tests that we would do, right? If you're going to buy a teapot, you want to probably try and use it first. If it performs up to what you expect a Juni teapot to perform like, whatever that means for you, then it's probably not an issue that it's blended with some Xiaohongni or whatever it's blended with. You probably really won't know. But I would say you want to be testing the pot and it should meet your expectations. It should improve the qualities of some teas in line with what you personally think Juni is usually doing to your tea. If you see that it's doing something totally different, then maybe there's some weird stuff in there.
There's also a difference between Xiaohongni blended with Juni and Juni blended with Xiaohongni. The proportion is very important. By the end of the day, Xiaohongni is also a natural material, right? It's just like Shihuan and Shihong. You blend it with clay. After firing, it's usually safe to brew tea with. You have a teapot made out of 90% of Xiaohongni with 10% of Juni and other things. That's essentially a Xiaohongni teapot, right? But if you have a Juni teapot and you color it with some Xiaohongni and other Shihuan or Shihong to make the color more vibrant, essentially you bring a teapot that consists majority of Juni with a lot of Juni features, but just with some Xiaohongni as coloration to make it more visually appealing. So that will be the key difference, I guess, in this blending case. So back to Pat's point, do test the teapot with actual tea and then see the effect. And if it's up to your standard, great.
This was just reminding me. So when Jason was here in Seattle just a week or two ago, we were talking with actually another Tea Technique subscriber and fellow tea drinker about a story where someone was telling us that a certain tea teacher, who I think we're all aware of, was able to sense Yixing clay shards beneath the ground. I think, Jason, you probably remember this story as well. But what we're going to try and build, our new skill as we're writing this book, is we're going to be able to touch a teapot and our fingers will tell us exactly what the blend in the teapot is. So, yeah, this is a 90% Juni, 10% Xiaohongni. Maybe I'll try the next teapot. You put your hand on it. Oh, this is 50-50. I definitely don't want that. That's the new skill we're all going to build through this book. And you can learn how to do it too with 3 easy installments of $99.99.
No, you're selling our skill cheap, Pat.
Sorry, $9.99.
Like and subscribe.
Please like and subscribe.
If you pay now for 1 lifetime membership.
So we agree that the art of pinpei blending is very common, that many of the teapots that we're approaching are going to be a blended material. We can tell if they're natural material. We can tell if they've been acid washed. We can tell if they've been modified or colorized in some way most of the time. But we're not going to know the specific ratios. We're not going to know frequently anything other than the dominant clay in the blend, which hopefully we can identify. So what about when merchants tell you or mislabel Xiaohongni and Hongni? Are you confident in your ability to differentiate the two? Do you believe that that's wrong for merchants to do? Do you believe that a lot of people are getting duped into buying Xiaohongni teapots that are mislabeled as Hongni?
I doubt my ability to be able to identify a pinpei blend with very little Xiaohongni. let's call it under 40%. And I honestly doubt most vendors' abilities to pick out whether Xiaohongni is in the blend or not. Teapot makers, on the other hand, probably have a better idea of what they're working with.
What about
Yeah.
when it is higher? If the ratio is 60% Xiaohongni, 80% Xiaohongni, do you believe that you could identify it and differentiate it from Hongni?
I think it depends on what it's being sold as. If it is being sold as Hongni, I think I would probably recognize that this is a little strange for Hongni. I don't know that I would know it's because it's Xiaohongni until I see a very good example.
Xiaohongni do tend to have a more lighter than orange color compared to general Hongni, but it also could be because of firing temperature and other factors when the seller claims this is a Hongni. So there are a lot of factors playing into the final results. But I would definitely put a question mark on the where if the Xiaohongni is indeed over 60% and there are some abnormal color or surface texture on the teapot.
I would assume surface texture, very rough surface texture and a lighter color orange, almost feels under fired.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's end on something positive. Can we view the discovery and use of Xiaohongni in the F1 period as a positive innovation? Did it move the art of Yixing forward in any way?
I would argue that it definitely expands the spectrum of minerals or ores that can be called as Yixing clay or Yixing teapot. Being I would say, not traditionally a DOCG area for Yixing clay production, being part of that family during the F1 period, definitely you can see how Yixing ceramists are expanding their view on different materials and experiment with more different minerals, different addition to the clay to see the effect.
I own a neizi waihong, and I absolutely love that pot. There was a shortage, right, of Hongni material. This Xiaohongni, I think, allowed more pots during that era to come out, more materials that were red in color. Whether that was good or bad, I don't know, but I think at least it got them through a shortage, right? So that's a positive thing.
I think so too. Just echoing on Zongjun's comment on the experimenting and new material, new ways of firing, and then they would have to reevaluate the previous methods that they were doing things. So I think in that sense, definitely allowed for the art of Yixing to move forward. And I also suddenly just realized this entire series of chapters is probably not very friendly to colorblind people.
Yeah. Teapot identification is probably difficult with colorblindness issues.
So is there anything we could do with the whole finger touching?
Definitely hard to teach through a book.
You'd have to come have tea with us, and we'd be happy to share the collection. I mean, color is not consistently the best way to differentiate. Many of the ores can be fired to a different color, blended into a different color naturally, at different firing temperatures, different ratios. And so I don't really recommend using color as your primary skill in identification. It's the easiest thing to communicate through the book and through the visual medium. But in person, when you watch someone identify a teapot, particularly an antique or something that they're looking to acquire, it's always done through a tactile sense, in addition to tasting the tea that comes from the pot and smelling the pot. If it smells like pond, there's usually something wrong with the firing. If it smells like hot sand, that could be a good sign. So color is important in this visual medium. And here we are talking on a podcast where we were not even showing photos. Hopefully everyone's a subscriber. But really it comes down to tactile sensation is going to be the most important feature for identification.
Yeah, maybe someone with visual impairment will be like Zatoichi, Blind Samurai, and just like touch the pot and they'll just know right away. They'll have that skill I was talking about before where they can even tell you the blend percentage.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, maybe it works the other way. They can teach us.
All right, everyone. That's all the time that we have today. Thank you for joining us in this edition of Tea Technique Editorial Conversations. Please join us again for our next conversation, Junie Ore and Clay.